Cross-section, the Panther tank, Ausf G. Whether deep in the wilderness or on the battlefields of the Second World War, it pays to be wary of big cats. One of the most legendary tanks of that conflict was the German Panzer V Panther, a vehicle which struck fear into the hearts of the Allies who faced it. Origins. While the search for a replacement for the Panzer IV tank began in 1938, the origin of the Panther began after Operation Barbarossa in 1941. In spite of the overwhelming success of the early stages of the invasion, German High Command began to worry about the effectiveness of its Panzer III and IVs against the Soviet T-34s and KV-1s they were encountering. After careful study of captured T-34s, a competition was set up to produce a new medium tank that could compete with it on the battlefield. Several prototypes were put forward from Krupps, Daimler-Benz, and others. The winning design was a prototype made by Maschinenfabrik Augsburg-Nürnberg, or MAN, was selected in late 1942. After a few more adjustments, the newly developed tank went into production in January of 1943. It was given the designation of Panzerkampfwagen 5 Panther, and it was first sent into combat that July on the Eastern Front. Variants. Over the course of the war, there were several variants of the Panther. Confusingly, the first to enter production was the Ausf D, Ausf being the abbreviation on the German word Ausführung, or version. The next model was the Ausf A, followed by the Ausf G. This is in contrast to other German tank designations, where the first type in a production run is given the A designation, then B, and so on. The G variant was the last production variant of the Panther to enter combat, though there was an F variant with the updated turret and a Panther II tank that was also planned, though the war ended before either made it to the production line. It was an update of the Ausf A on a redesigned chassis and had modifications to make production easier and cheaper.
Hey simple historians, ever had a desire for a pocket-sized real-time strategy game that brings classic PC war games to your mobile device? World War Armies by Hypemaster has got you covered. Drawing inspiration from legendary games like Command & Conquer, World War Armies brings it with authentic World War II vehicles and infantry, allowing you to finesse your battle tactics while admiring its breathtaking 3D graphics. Choose your side from among the game's powerhouse nations, USA, Germany, or the USSR. Each nation has got over 20 unique units at your command, from hard-hitting tanks to specialized engineers, flamethrowers, and Jaegers. The strategy doesn't stop there. Every nation also comes with unique generals, each with special abilities that can turn the tide of battle. From calling in airstrikes to increasing your resource collection, your general could be your ace in the hole. Battlefield variety? Check. From maps filled with obstacles for strategy lovers to more direct and fast-paced battlefields, World War Armies has it all. Plus, the fun doesn't stop with 1v1. Invite a friend for a 2v2 battle. And here's the best part. Install the game using the link in the description, complete the tutorial, and you'll get the Pershing tank, a desert skin, and tokens. Ready for battle? I'll see you on the battlefield.
Dimensions. The Panzer Ausf G measures in at 29 feet in length, 11 feet in width, and a height of 10 feet, or 8.86 meters by 3.42 meters by 3.1 meters. The weight of the Panther is 45 metric tons, slightly heavier than the D variant, though still considerably lighter than the Tiger, which weighed in at 54 tons. The Panther was a smaller and more maneuverable alternative to the Tiger series of tanks and was classified by German High Command as a medium tank. Crew. Like all versions of the Panther, the Ausf G had a crew of 5 men, a commander, driver, gunner, loader, and radio operator, who was also a machine gunner. The commander would be located in a cupola at the rear of the turret, behind the gunner and loader. The driver would be seated lower in the hull on the left side of the vehicle. To his right would be the radio operator. In earlier versions, the driver would view the world through an armored viewport cut into the hull. In order to mitigate this obvious weak point, the opening was replaced by a single traversable periscope. This had the additional benefit of simplifying the production process. Armament. The main gun of the Panzer Ausf G, like all the other variants, was a 75mm high-velocity cannon. While this is the same caliber as the main gun of the M4 Sherman, it has a much higher muzzle velocity due to a larger powder charge and longer barrel. This gave the main gun of the Panther excellent armor penetration against Allied tanks. The AUSF-G carried 82 rounds of ammunition for the main gun, a slight increase over the 79 rounds of earlier versions. The second armament of the Panther were a pair of MG-34 7.92mm machine guns. One was located in the turret coaxially to the main gun. The second was located at the bow of the gun and utilized by the radio operator. Armor. The AUSF-G, like all versions of the Panther, made use of sloped armor, known as glasses plates, which was inspired by studies of the Soviet T-34. This feature increased the protection while reducing weight. In order to further reduce the vehicle's weight, the sides and rear would have thinner armor than the front. The frontal armor of the Panther was 80 millimeters thick, and due to the sloping, meant that an enemy shell would effectively have to penetrate around 100 millimeters of armor, something that many Allied guns, especially the 75mm cannon of the M4 Sherman, had difficulty in accomplishing. The sides and rear of the Panther were thinner at 45 millimeters in thickness, and the top of the tank was relatively thin at 30 millimeters. Because of the thickness of the frontal armor and relative vulnerability of the flanks, Allied tank crews would attempt to maneuver around the side of the Panther to score a kill. The AUSF-G also had thicker side pannier armor compared to earlier variants, which protected the upper portion of tracks and suspension system. Engine and fuel. The Panther AUSF-G was propelled by a Maybach V12 water-cooled petrol engine capable of generating 600 horsepower. It could move the vehicle at a top speed of 46 kilometers per hour, or 28.5 miles per hour. The fuel capacity was 730 liters, or 190 gallons, giving the Panther an operational range of around 200 kilometers, or 124 miles. The Panther AUSF-G had a ZF AK-7 200 transmission. This allowed for 7 gears moving forward and 1 in reverse. Production. During the course of the war, around 6,000 Panthers were built, the AUSF-G making the majority of around 3,000. They were produced by a number of manufacturers, primarily Maschinenfabrik Augsburg-Nürnberg, but also Maschinenfabrik Niedersachsen Hanover and Daimler-Benz. Night vision. A number of Panther AUSF-G were equipped with the state-of-the-art FG-1250 Sperber or Sparrowhawk infrared night fighting scope. This device was located in the commander's cupola, where it was connected to an image converter and a machine that sensed the elevation of the main gun. This gave the commander a limited amount of night vision, up to 600 meters away, though only the commander had this ability, the rest of the crew reliant on his orders. It's unknown how many were equipped with this technology, with estimates ranging from around 20 to over 50. In January of 1945, it was ordered that all Panthers would have this feature, though it's unknown if this was carried out. Flaws. In spite of its advantages, the Panther was not without its flaws. Like most German tanks, they were much more complex and unreliable compared to their Allied counterparts. The first was the track and suspension system. Like most German tanks, the Panther utilized 18 interleaved wheels, or road wheels that overlapped one another. Such a configuration gave the tank more mobility and more evenly distributed its weight, but it came at the cost of complexity. In order to repair the suspension system, several overlapping wheels would have to be removed to access the internal workings, a complex and time-consuming task, especially in a war zone. Many of the earlier variants of the Panther suffered engine and transmission problems, with significant numbers being out of action due to mechanical failures. By the creation of the AUSF-G, many of these issues were mitigated, but the Panther did suffer from reduced reliability compared to their Allied counterparts. Another flaw was the Panther's armor. While the sloped armor of the Panther was generally effective at deflecting enemy shells, as the war progressed and Allied strategic bombing ravaged German industry, flaws in the manufacturing process made the steel brittle. Even if the shot was deflected, there was a risk that the impact would shatter the metal, damaging the tank beyond repair or making it vulnerable to a follow-up shot. The final flaw of the Panther was its limited production run. Of all the variants, around 6,000 were created, around 3,000 being the AUSF-G, paling in comparison to the estimated 84,000 T-34s and 50,000 M4 Shermans they faced, any advantage in quality being nullified by sheer weight of numbers. Legacy. The Panther first saw combat on the Eastern Front in July of 1943. From then on, it served in all operational theaters. The Wehrmacht deployed tank forces until the German surrender in May 1945. During that time, the Panther garnered a reputation as one of the finest tanks in use by the Germans, being feared and respected by the Allies who faced it. Many argue about it being the best tank of the war, and in spite of its flaws, could possibly be considered among the top armored vehicles of the Second World War.